Good morning. It's May the 12th, and we are convening the accommodations task force meeting for the day. Did want to let everybody know that and acknowledge that the press and the public have been duly notified of this meeting. So, and that's in accordance with the Freedom of Information Act. First order of business is, Nicole, could we do a roll call, please? Okay. Here.
Mr. Burns.
Here.
Ms. Vega. Here. Mr. Harris.
Here.
Councilman
Here. Okay. Thank you. So, next, I'd like to move on to the approval of the previous meetings minutes from April the 21st, 2022. So, do I hear a motion to approve those?
Second.
Okay. Any edits or revisions from anyone? All right. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay. All right. Next, we have citizens' comments. And okay, so how many do we have total? Three to speak. Okay. All right. Ground rules. We're going to do it just like we do it at City Council. Citizens' comments, 3-minute time limit. 3-minute time limit. There will be no questions coming from the panel here. We would just take information, okay? Since we only have 3 signed up, we don't have to worry too much about the 30-minute aggregate total time limit. That would normally be in effect. So we will go ahead with citizens' comments. So let's call our first one up, please.
Good morning. My name is Glenda Nemus. I'm a full-time resident on Isle of Palms. I came to give you some information and let you know where that information or that informed decision came from. Recommendations that the ATAX Advisory Committee made or would have advised, or I would have advised, are to form our own 7-person board like Folly process have accountability and transparency, metrics, and contracts. This is based on extensive research and in-depth study by the ATAX Advisory Committee. The 3 of us have looked into this in depth and shared lots of information and had many discussions. We've looked at past relevant ATAX committee meeting notes, city council meetings, TURT meetings. We've done a forensic deep dive into our current DMO provider. We've looked at public opinion through the Nextdoor Communicate IOP and talking to various citizens. We have looked at reports from area municipalities about their spending. We have looked at legal cases, opinions, implications, including the Attorney General's office and South Carolina Supreme Court decisions. We have studied documents from the Municipal Association of South Carolina, TURT documents, and guidelines. We've talked to the State Treasurer's Office, had discussions of what their future actions and interests are to reform correct methods of transparency and accountability. We've studied the Folly Beach model in depth. We've looked at newspaper and media research, tourism publications for trends and future directions, especially toward management versus promotion. We've looked at over-tourism and accountability. We've looked at global models for tourism sustainability. We've done stakeholder analysis, informal assessment of the island's needs. We've looked at the ease and process to initiate the new recommended model, the financial benefits and savings of having our alternative owned tourism board. We've talked to the Turk Office administration in depth. We've done an analysis of what current and future services involve as, and what services we would look into. Okay, best practices. I have two more points. Best practices for promotion spending in the current climate, such as digital and flexibility. Or digital, for example.
Okay, Mr. Truslow,
Good morning.
morning.
I'm Doug Truslow. I live on the Isle of Palms. It may be of interest, I was married here in the Methodist Church in 1971. There were 6,100 people in Mount Pleasant at the time. Think about that and how that impacts on our tourism now. I understand we're limited to 3 minutes, so I'm going to try to hit the high points. This is a very serious matter. It's important to our residents, our businesses, and our tourists. The good news, we have a path forward. We've looked at what Folly Beach has done. You can look at what Somerville has done, Sumter, Greenwood. You can go down the East Coast and see how the trend is away from the large DMOs that control a lot of money and try to please large groups. We're dealing with an amount of money now so that we can focus on ourselves. It wasn't that way 25, 30 years ago, but we have enough money now that we can do it ourselves in our residents' best interest, our tourists' best interest, our businesses' best interest. What we don't have and what we do need as a positive, we don't have a contract. Can you imagine having millions of dollars, no contract, no method, no metrics, no oversight, no accountability? We just give them the money. And one person has been told when they asked about how our money was being spent, it was none of our business how our money is spent. That's a quote. We can have oversight, we can have transparency, we can represent all. I just say, this is what some of the things that we did is we wanted to follow the money. Look at how it was being spent. Was it being responsibly spent for the Isle of Palms? And I just did a little seesaw here. Here's the Isle of Palms, our money. Charleston County, Sullivan's Island, Folly. This benefit is if we follow the model of Folly Beach or ones like it up and down the coast again, we can have responsibility. We can make sure our money is spent for the Isle of Palms and our money isn't being used to subsidize others. One final comment, and I promise you, he didn't pay me to say this. Ray Burns, he's a resident, a wonderful, credible person. He's very skilled. He's looked at, he's spent hundreds and hundreds of hours looking into this and reporting back to us and reporting to, with our administration's help, and we thank them. He's done a wonderful job gathering information, and I would urge you, he's on your committee, urge you to consider carefully what he will tell you, having spent many, many, many hours unselfishly to serve our community. Ray, thank you for all you've done. You've done a wonderful job, and I hope everyone will listen.
Mr. Robert Smith.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Robert Smith, the owner and operator of Charleston.com and the Chart Group Incorporated. And I want to kind of explain a little bit who we are, just We started off with the in-room channel inside hotel and resorts and then expanded out to various other arenas because hotels and resorts and restaurants and things to do and activities asked us to. So we are now in the web business. About 6 years ago, I purchased Charleston.com. So I wanted to let you guys know there's another game in town, another resource you have to getting promotions done with the islands. We are the big dogs. There's only one geodomain per area. And what that means is the relevance of we're the only .com for Charleston. And I know the Isle of Palms is in Charleston, but people come here for the rich history, for the restaurants, for things to do. With all of the accolades that we have, you can imagine the traffic that we get is enormous. We are the guys who really haven't been really looked at yet as a possibility for opportunities to get the message out. Charleston is the #1 city. The one thing that we focus on is SEO, search engine optimization for keyword. We do business with businesses on this island. We know the analytics here. We know the people who are coming. We know where they're from. We know what they're doing. We know more information that no one's even asked us to give to you to make a proper decision. So all we're asking is that maybe we have an opportunity to sit down as a resource since we are the big dogs in town. I promise you, there's so many people that would love to have the URL domain we have. It has a lot of credibility. It has a lot of marketing positives, and that's just one resource that really doesn't get looked at much. I think one of the key components that really affect us is that we are a for-profit, not a nonprofit. What the one thing that we have on our that's positive in our arena is that not only do we distribute the content for you, we produce as well. And if you look at our Google rankings, you'll notice that we're very high under the key phrase of Charleston. We can meet with hundreds of millions of other web pages, and we're killing it online. I'm just asking the council or the group to consider us as a resource, maybe even a resource just for gathering information. We are professionals at SEO and analytics.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Okay, all right. Moving on. Item number 4, brainstorming session to define success based on stated goal and discussion of ideas. This is something we had that came up in our last meeting. And Desiree, is this to be distributed at this point?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. We have, pass those down.
So what we did is we went through the notes and the comments that the committee made at the last meeting when the discussion about what does success look like and things you all want to consider. And we just put them out in a piece of paper, hopefully to help guide the discussion today and kind of start where we left off. Some of the points that were articulated at the last meeting was a desire for more accountability, a local focus, more flexibility in the use of the 30% tourism promotion funds, more resident input in how the funds are spent, more collaboration with the city, an off-season focus, and tourism management focus. So hopefully this helps your conversation today in maybe talking a little bit more about the specifics of what that looks like. Some things to consider were included based on the conversation at the last meeting. So we can certainly continue and go through one by one and add more specifics to how can we achieve what you all have articulated as being a successful forward-looking path with the DMO. There's also a conversation I don't think that you all have entertained yet, which goes back to what options there are. Do we continue with the same current structure with the existing DMO and focus on repairing that? That was mentioned at the last meeting. Follow a different model like other communities have done, and so on and so forth. So I think that hopefully that helps your discussion today, and be happy to answer any questions and facilitate.
What I'd like for us to do, if the committee, the task force is open to this, is could we just take each one of these 7 major areas, what does success look like, and just kind of quickly go through the things to consider and see if there's anything else that needs to be added, or if anyone has other thoughts in regards to what has been captured here, be good. Okay. So you want to lead that discussion?
I can do it.
Okay, if you don't mind.
No.
Okay.
So more accountability. Some of the comments that have been made is, more financial reporting from the DMO, whether that's monthly or quarterly. A need to establish and measure performance metrics. Develop a contract with the DMO detailing expectations and these performance metrics. And financial reporting specific to IOP tourism promotion activities, not in the aggregate. If, currently there's a regional model that the city participate with the existing DMO. But this has been requested repeatedly, that we can get a financial report of exactly what activities or what monies are spent on IOP specific.
Mhm. And developing a contract with our DMO or DMOs. I mean, that comes up a lot too. And I think, the ATAX Advisory Committee, certainly surfaced that during their meetings over the past year or so. And I think there's basically been a kind of a consensus, if you will, even among the council group, just in casual conversation, that we certainly put something like that in place too. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think right now, Charleston County has a contract with Explore Charleston or CBB, right?
That's correct.
But none of the other municipalities do.
Not that we know of.
Yeah, okay. Any feedback? Sam, Sarah, Ray, Curtis?
Contractual arrangement. On an annual basis, is there a budget? What is the contract with Charleston County? What doing now?
The contract that Charleston County entered with the CVB last year pretty much references state law. I don't recall, but I don't think it includes a specific number, just it establishes that they would be receiving the 30% of the state aid tax that is received for the fiscal year. There is a section in that contract that allows for financial reporting to be presented. So it establishes that expectation that those financial reports are presented to the group, to the community, the municipality on an ongoing basis. But essentially, it's a very boilerplate language contract that references state law. The contract we saw did not include any performance metrics as maybe what we all would like to see. That doesn't mean that ours can't have it.
Any other thoughts on the more accountability section? Do we have extras on this? If we do, I don't mind if the audience gets a copy of it.
From the accountability point of view, by state law, a DMO is required to submit at year end a full accounting of their activities. And CDB does that by supplying a high level financial statement with no detail really at all. It's just a very summarized high level P&L basically. And I think what the ATAX committee and was looking for, and a number of other, this group as well, I believe, is more specific detail on what money is being spent, targeted specifically to Isle of Palms. And I know it's mentioned in the last bullet item under accountability, but I think that's the most important thing, is what money is being spent specifically on Isle of Palms. Yeah, that's been our focus, and I think that needs to be an important part of the accountability. We don't really care what they're doing with Charleston or anywhere else. All we care about is how our money is being spent to the benefit of Isle of Palms.
Thank you, Ray. Anyone else? Thoughts?
Any other activity or requests that you all think would increase accountability and transparency with a DMO, whether it's the existing one or a future one, if that's where the city decides to do.
Who's the point person for the relationship with the city council members, correct?
That's correct. We have a member who serves on the board for the CBB.
Okay, is there direct management, direct contact with them? Is there a person that's accountable for performance, or is that the accommodations tax advisory?
So I'm not sure I follow.
My point is, there's not a point person managing that relationship on a day-to-day basis. Maybe
That's correct.
something that the city should consider.
Mhm,
Just throwing this idea out.
mhm. Yeah, because I mean, I think so we have a council member who serves on the board and they receive financial information from the aggregate, from the CVB as an organization. In the past, we've had members of the CVB come and present to the ATAX committee, whether that has been done in the frequency that may be needed. Maybe that's something that could be improved. I do know that Helen Hill at one of the ATAX committees better. But yeah, we don't have any staff person in currently that serves on a day-to-day the role of tourism management or tourism promotion.
Full disclosure, I am on the Board of Governors for Explore Charleston or CVB, appointed by council. So that's an annual appointment. It's renewed each year. It's at the discretion of the mayor. And I am serving on that this year. We have a monthly meeting. In fact, next week we will have a budget meeting of which I will attend. So just want to get that out there. So, okay.
We can blame you for all the problems.
You've tried getting accountability in the past, and it hasn't worked. So how do we think we can go forward and require more accountability? We're just sort of subject to their whim. If we scream loud enough, they may give us a little information. But so far, I gather that we're not getting it. And if it wasn't for this little group here, they still wouldn't even be concerned about Isle of Palms. I mean, I'm all for the new DMO, like what Folly Beach or this gentleman suggested. And I would like to, and it's not in the order here, I know, but I would like to have part of our money go to a new DMO. And part of it stay with the existing DMO. And then we see how it works out. I mean, all these things we would want from our new DMO as well as the Charleston DMO. And so do we list what we want, or, I mean, so far you've had a rough time getting any information, right?
Yeah, the truth of the matter is, we had a presentation by the business development fellow from Charleston Area Visitors Bureau early on, about a year ago. We asked him a bunch of financial accountability questions, and he said, I'm really not the right person to speak to. He said, you need to speak to our accountant or finance person, and that they connected one of our committee members to that person, and he was told that information is none of our business. And that was referenced by Mr. Truslow. So that, that is what that's the information we received. And like I said, what we get, they comply with state law by giving us a financial statement. But there's no detail. There's nothing having to do with where any specific money is being spent. It's just a very high level summary P&L. And that's been, and that has been acceptable up to this point as complying with state law.
And I believe that is in compliance with state law, basically. I think they give us what state law dictates, as other DMOs do across the state or whatever, from what I understand. And, you know, so it's at a very high level, as you said.
Yeah, yeah, as comparison, that does comply. It's
Uh-huh.
been accepted and it does comply. By comparison, this committee saw Folly Beach's budget detailed by line item on where their money is being spent. And that's the comparison.
Okay. I believe there's been, and Desiree, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that the CVB has been more open to wanting to do more things that are Isle of Palm specific. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think they've approached us with some ideas on that, right?
Yes, and that was something that was presented to this committee when they came before you all, also to the ATAX committee, some ideas that they're exploring this IOP specific website that highlights and advertises and promotes, I guess, of all businesses on the island and all short-term rental property managers. You know, other than that, I don't know specifically, you know, if they have or are planning more IOP specific advertisement in magazines or online. Certainly that's something that's been asked. I think that, you know, as long as it seems to me that as long as that vision fits with their overall regional vision, that would be something that they would embrace.
Anything else on accountability before we move on?
I do think with the accountability, the idea of restaurants and comments and control, look at who is serving us and what other opportunities might pertinent to us to include that in the recommendation. Make sure that we're still serving the best interests of
Thank you, Sarah. Okay, let's move on to local focus and discuss that a little bit. So Desiree, I guess the develop Isle of Palms branding.
Yeah,
Talk
that
a little
was,
bit about that.
that was talked about at the last meeting about wanting to have something that that just highlights and highlights Isle of Palm specifically. There's a belief, I guess, by the committee and something that the ATAX committee has also talked about, not having that local feel or that local brand, and wanting to pursue doing that, whether again, it's with the existing DMO or something that the city does separately with those funds. And again, it's been talked about wanting to have some IOP specific tourism advertisement. There is, you know, we've talked about the proportion of the funding that the city provides to the CVB as part of our 30% compared to the other local beaches, certainly significantly higher. And the belief is that treating Isle of Palms the same way as the other beaches is not equitable because of the amount of funding that the city provides compared to the others. So I think that was the reasoning behind a more local focus, that there's a little bit more equity in this, the spending on Isle of Palms versus the other Charleston regions that the CVB also promotes.
They send out a weekly report. I'm not sure how that gets, I guess it's on their website. I'm talking about Explore Charleston.
I think it's quarterly.
No, we get a weekly one too, but I don't know if that's just to our council and administration or what. That, you know, the one I'm talking about from William Howe. Do you
Oh,
get
yes,
that?
yes.
Okay.
Mhm.
And it's typically kind of a weekly recap. And it lists, as part of that report, the mentions of different municipalities that are part of the Explore Charleston CVB group. And, you know, and it will list, you know, what magazines we've been mentioned in, you know, what what articles that are published through whatever, print media or otherwise. And if you read that, many times we don't get a lot of mention. Isle of Palms does it. I mean, it's more low country oriented. We get some, but we don't get, as many mentions as you would hope that we would, given the amount of ATAX dollars that get contributed from Isle of Palms. Matter of fact, Sullivan's Island, Folly Beach get just about as many mentions as we do, and they don't contribute nearly as much, of course. So that's another thing to consider too. If we, for local focus, we really need to have our DMOs/DMOs really step up and make it more targeted to fit us. Not necessarily, in my opinion, to bring more visitors here. I don't know that we want to have more people come, basically. But when they do come here, as we know they are going to come here, we'd like for them to spend more, get the spend up. So that's part of what we ought to be looking for too, in my opinion. Any thoughts on that? Anybody?
Well, if we have our own DMO, we would be able to control that. We could support all these city activities that tourists enjoy as well as locals. And I don't think we want to forget. If we don't do stuff to make the locals happy, they're not going to be happy with all these tourists that come and spend a week at our houses. So I guess you can tell I'm from a new DMO. Very obvious.
Thank you, Curtis. Any other thoughts? Okay. All right, let's move on to item number 3, more flexibility in the use of the 30% ATAX. So you want to tee that one up,
Sure.
Desiree? We've had some conversation about this before.
Yes. It was mentioned at the last meeting that the city should advocate for more flexibility, greater flexibility in the spending of the 30% tourism promotion funds. According to state law, those funds have to be spent only on tourism promotion and advertisement. I know that it has been raised in the past about how other communities spend the 30%. I'm concerned about Isle of Palms and making sure that Isle of Palms follows state law. So that the way that the city has always interpreted that section is very, very clear that it's to be spent on tourism promotion and advertisement, not on other tourism related expenditures, which is what is available to the city with the 65%, the other 65%, which we currently use to support city operations, particularly with police, fire, and public works, which, as everybody knows, are severely impacted during the summer season because of tourism activity and visitation. Therefore, I think that the energy and the advocacy should be focused on advocating in the General Assembly for changing the language in state law that would give more flexibility in the expenditure of the 30%. But in the meantime, we have to operate within the existing bounds of state law and follow that section. Therefore, again, that's the reason why the 30% money is distributed in its entirety to the existing DMO.
I know that we've retained a lobbying group basically to represent us at the State House. Have we, to your knowledge, have we had any conversation with them at all about addressing this issue at the state level?
Yes, I do know that Mayor Pounds has had conversations with them about this topic, and he's also been reaching out to other local mayors, mayors from beach communities, to essentially develop a coalition of municipalities that would support this effort.
Okay. Thoughts?
Yeah, I just wanted to share the listening that I've done over the past few months in the community of coffees and from people who have had conversations with me. This the piece that it seems like residents care about a lot. The question comes up over and over again. Why do we have to spend it on marketing? Can't we spend it on something that's more visible, that we as residents can enjoy the same as our tourists can enjoy? I think it's harder for residents to wrap their minds around the indirect benefits that we get from the ATAX dollars of more police, more fire service. It's easier for them to wrap their minds around something that they can actually see within the community that they can enjoy too. So this is a big one that I've heard over and over again that we really need to include in our recommendations.
I agree. Any other thoughts? Sam, Ray, Curtis?
So in other words, they want money to go towards local activities, like a parade, like a concert, the things that are available now, like to have more money from accommodations tax to help support those.
Sure, just greater flexibility that we don't have to spend it on an advertisement in a magazine, that we can use it, but it's something everybody could enjoy. Those are great examples. I haven't heard those specifically, but I think they're great examples of the types of things people would enjoy.
Well, and I don't know, I don't think that when this section of the law was, was approved and passed, I don't think anybody anticipated the amount of accommodation tax revenue that a municipality could receive. So there's certainly a lot of heartburn about the amount of money that has to be spent on tourism promotion. It is something, it has to be managed and maintained. You have to kind of feed the beast so that you can continue to enjoy the revenues that the city receives from tourism activity that help offset a lot of the costs that the city would otherwise have to essentially pay for using property tax revenues. I think that's a very important point, that the city has been able to mitigate that by using the tourism funds this way. However, that would require a change in state law that would allow the city to use 20% of the 30% in other activities that certainly would support tourism. There's been an advocacy that, tourism or tourists are not going to come to the island if all the roads are flooded. So there's drainage, which we currently use, part of the 65% on drainage and other projects, but it's never enough, as we all know. And is there a need to revisit that, to allow municipalities to deal with infrastructure projects, infrastructure needs that ultimately are necessary in order to support a healthy tourism environment in the city?
So tourism dollars can't be used to help promote a parade on Isle of Palms or a symphony on Isle of Palms. It has to be through advertising directly. I mean, it seems like all of that would work.
The city would have to justify that as being a tourism promotion activity.
So it's up to the city that can say that by having a parade downtown is good for tourism. I mean, we're gonna have tourists that come here that are gonna wanna go to that parade.
Correct.
Yeah, Desiree, to your point too about how it could have possibly have been forecast way back when in regards to the growth of the ATAX dollars that are being contributed, I guess, by different municipalities. I know Debbie Suggs did a recap, and for example, in 2002, Isle of Palms contributed $215,000. We're forecast in 2023 for $826,000. So that's how it's grown over all those years. And so, I mean, we're going to pretty quickly, things keep going the way they are, we'll be looking at $1 million contribution for that 30%. But right now we're bound by statute. I mean, that 30%, the way it's defined, has to go to tourism and promotion. And we have that other pool that we're not dealing with in this task force, but the 65% that we can have more flexibility with too. So it's amazing how it's grown. I mean, and I guess that's a good thing. It shows just how successful things have been in the Charleston area. And, honestly, I mean, I think we all, and I think the ATAX Advisory Committee as a whole recognize this too, to a large part. The Charleston Visitors Bureau, Explore Charleston, did a good job in bringing people to the Low Country. Yeah, I've heard those words mentioned by every member of our ATAX Advisory Committee in the past. Now, has it been specific to Isle of Palms? I think we all see that there's more opportunity, just as we're discussing here. But certainly there's been a large amount of success over the years in getting more people into this area. So,
Well, and how are we measuring success?
mhm,
For many years, the city was measuring success by the amount of revenue that the city was receiving through accommodations tax revenue. And as you showed, it has grown significantly. So the reason that our 30% is more every year, it's because overall, we're receiving more tourism-related revenues. The same way that Soraya McKay indicated that that's how they measured success with Folly. They look at their revenues every year, and if they're growing, they're making a correlation that their tourism promotion activity for Folly specifically is being effective. I guess it depends on how we're measuring success. Is it a virtue of how many IOP specific mentions the city has year after year, or is it ultimately how much revenue the city receives from tourism activity on the island? That's the question for the group or council to determine.
mhm.
So if we have our own DMO, we could easily measure that. Whereas if we're just thrown in with the Charleston, it's pretty tough to measure that. Charleston DMO.
Well, we know how much the city is getting specifically.
Right, but do we know what is really successful and what's not successful?
That's the question. Do
Mhm.
we think we can make, does this group think, or the city think that we can, if we define success in terms of tourism revenue that the city receives every year, do we think that we can maintain that same level of tourism related revenues by having our own DMO? And do we want to make more money from tourism activity on the island than what we've currently been making? That's a question.
A lot of the money coming in is it's happening everywhere. All the resort areas are booming. And so it just happens, I think, that all of this advertising is nice, but it would happen anyway. We're gonna get tourists here because of our beach. And the mountains are getting it because of the mountains and all the amenities they have to offer. It just seems, I'm sorry, that we should control our own destiny and have a shot at our destiny and not be dependent on Helen giving us a website. That's just throwing something at us to appease it. Sorry.
Well, I mean, that's what we're here for. I mean, we're going to ultimately, very soon, going to be making some recommendations to council to consider. And certainly, if we decide as a recommendation that we want to go to council and say we would like to carve off a piece of that 30% and have an additional DMO that we more control ourselves, we can make that recommendation. Ultimately, that's what we need to decide we want to go forward with to the council.
Okay, the current accommodations tax group that's being reappointed, they can't be the DMO.
No, that's not their function. Their function is an advisory board to the council. So when we have enough members to have a quorum again and they meet, they will retain that. That's exactly what they have to do or what has to be done by statute, basically.
State law essentially dictates that if a municipality decides to create their own DMO, they have to appoint a separate board that will oversee that DMO. It would have the same,
Seemed like it was the same makeup that you
that's
have now.
right.
Yeah,
Sounds silly, right? But
Yeah.
that's
Yeah,
what the
right.
law says.
that's what the law said. And remember, when we had the Folly presentation, we had a representative here from their committee, basically. Forget the gentleman's name, Carl Halley, I think it was. But that was totally separate from their ATAX advisory board. So, and then the Little Dog agency, I guess, that were doing the work. I mean, they would work with that committee, basically, not the ATAX advisory board. I think I'm right on that. Yeah. Okay. So, a lot of it is, I mean, we're bound by statute on that 30%. So we, recommendation wise, when we get to the point where we're really nailing this down, we really need to give thought as to what we want to do in regards to DMOs/DMOs and move that as a recommendation to council.
I think concerning the 30%, you have two choices. You either request through legislation change, more flexibility within the 30%, which I think is going to be difficult to define. The alternative is just say, instead of 30%, go to 20%, and then your 65% pool becomes 75%. So, I think trying to define flexibility is going to be a moving target. What would be acceptable? Whereas if you just unilaterally change the percentage, accomplish the same thing with just a stroke of the pen. And all of the beneficiaries of the 30% are going to fight that tooth and nail, if you have to understand that. But that's what would be involved.
Yeah, that's a good point, Ray. I mean, any of us sitting here, do you think that would be an easy effort when you start lobbying on that 30% to reduce it to 20% or cap it to a certain amount of dollars? And then I'm sure that they have a pretty powerful lobby themselves. So,
It could be for a period of time. That could be a compromise, lower it for the next 10 years until municipalities are able to take care of some capital improvement projects and other needs, and then reevaluate whether, that becomes a time when you have to maybe focus again on tourism. Right now, we're all riding a really nice wave of economic activity, but if that changes, then maybe the perspective needs to change as well.
I think another thing we have to consider also, and Desiree brought the point up just a little while ago, touched on that, but whatever we do, we don't want to see things get derailed around here. I mean, you don't want to just jump in there and say, let's form our own DMO and just go for it ourselves. And then all of a sudden we start seeing ATAX dollars going the other way.
What would be a joint thing? You would keep the existing and then add our own. You're not gonna cut your throat off by putting it all on our local DMO. And if that doesn't work, we're screwed. You're gonna take part of the money, local, our own, and then keep Charles, like what Folly Beach did.
Good point. All right, so continue the lobbying effort. I hope Mayor Pounds is successful with his group of allies, so to speak, to continue to work on this. All right, let's move on to number 4, resident input and how funds are spent. So
So it's been talked about, wanting to greater collaboration with the ATAX committee in defining what success looks like, developing the budget for the year, on how the 30% funds are spent. It's something that we seem to be having or have had in the last maybe year. A little bit more of a focus on bringing the CBD into the ATAX committee. But in the past, that wasn't happening as frequently as maybe we would have liked. So that's something that's been discussed, and I know we talked about it last meeting. ATAX has also talked about it before. So any thoughts on that? Any other ways that we can define or increase how the community has input in what success looks like for the use or the spending of the tourism promotion?
Sorry, you had talked to people around town and you were saying that they were complaining there wasn't enough that went to local. Now, if there was a survey, would it do any good? If they surveyed that they would like a band playing on the beach or something? Would accommodations tax help pay for that? I mean, what good is a survey if you don't know what you can pay for? So you have to be pretty much defined. I think we should have a survey. But I think you have to really define what the guidelines are, so we don't land up with a survey that's totally out of whack.
Any thoughts on that, Desiree? I know that we had a brief discussion about having some survey questions.
Yeah.
But
we talked about this, prior to this meeting. What are we asking? We have to define that before we start putting a survey together, which I think this conversation and the recommendation should help. What do you want the community to chime in on? We want the community to participate, but how and in what sense? I think that piece is missing from the conversation.
I would say that just the activity of creating its own DMO will solicit resident input. I know I mentioned before, but the activity would be, okay, you form a 501c6, and then the city would solicit applications for people to be on a committee that's cross-functional, with lodging, hospitality, and cultural, and at large. So you're recruiting more people. I would think you maybe recruit people also that had expertise in internet marketing and things of that sort. And so you would, and then the city would select through the personnel committee. Personnel would recommend to city council to appoint the members of the DMO nonprofit committee. So that there'd be a separate group that then could have feedback from residents on a continuous basis, because like Folly, they meet every month. And they go through their plan and they make tweaks and adjustments as they go. And the formation of that committee creates that dialogue.
I'm not sure that a survey is going to help our specific group achieve our task of just defining the structure of how these funds are governed and who makes decisions about them. I feel like a survey is kind of the next step for once we decide how we're splitting our DMO funds or allocating them, then the citizen involvement piece becomes really important, because particularly if there is a new structure involved, it would be great to get feedback on what would you like to see that's different than what's happened in the past. I'm not sure that a survey is going to help us come to a decision of how do we allocate the funding and who utilizes our DMO.
good point. And I don't think we have the luxury of the time to do that either, in terms of a survey, not for what we're tasked to do. But Ray, I think your points, Sarah's points, Curtis, all of those are points well made here as we look at how those funds are spent. and how we engage the Isle of Palms community in helping set the vision going forward. Item number 5, more collaboration with the city.
Ensure alignment between the city and the DMO to ensure that the tourism promotion strategy, not strategy,
Okay.
meets the city's vision, mission, and strategic plan priorities. And I think that's very, it's connected, I guess, with the resident input, making sure that, again, that what they're doing is what we want them to do, whoever that is, and make sure that it's consistent with our vision for our community, ensuring quality of life is maintained and protected, and that we're aligned in what success looks like.
Yeah, to me, it sounds like when we have a problem to solve in the short term, like allocating this for dollars. In the long term, I think the Isle of Palms needs to establish that vision, that mission, and then it can put it out from there.
Mhm.
So, short-term immediate need, and then we need to have a process for establishing that vision.
Good point, Sam. Other thoughts, Ray?
Not to keep referencing Folly, but they're the only comparison I have to work with. On their TVPC, their Tourism Promotion Committee, their nonprofit DMO, there's a city administration representative on that committee that sits in on all the meetings and creates the city has full knowledge of what's going on through that representative. So there, that is a part of is a component of that. Engaging the city, the city's on the committee. Although they operate separately, the city has vision through the committee by a representative there.
And it's not a council member either. It's a staff person.
Right.
Which that would be something that the city would have to consider if that's the path we go to. We would need to add a staff member to the City Hall General Government Department to focus on this initiative. Because we, as you all know, we're only 5 upstairs. And we all wear multiple hats, but this would be a completely different and essentially a big undertaking that we currently do not have the resources to do.
So that would be something we'd have to consider in regards to any recommendation we make. You would be looking at possibly adding staff here. Just to handle
Absolutely,
this piece of it.
absolutely.
Now, you can't take accommodation tax money for that.
That could be considered.
Yeah, I don't know. Don't know the answer to that, but
I don't know either.
okay. Any other thoughts on that? On item number 5? All right, 6, off-season focus. Let's talk about that, shoulder season.
So I guess we've heard and talked about how we're very busy in the summer. We don't need any more people. They're already here. They're already coming. And should the tourism promotion focus on the off-season, shoulder seasons, rather than in the summer? I think, Curtis, you've mentioned this before. Just one thing to think about, something that we've heard from other committees and members of the community, a concern that then that effort will expand the busy season past the typical, June, July, August. I know that it's already expanded, but there's a concern from full-time residents that, that may not want to have more tourism in the shoulder seasons. That's something we've heard before and something I want to make sure that you all think about as part of an off-season focus.
Other than January and February, it's pretty much year round here. And I don't think you can stop it. As long as you've got rentals available and you've got a beach and you got Charleston, they're gonna keep coming.
We've got over 1,400 rentals right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we got a great beach, great community and they know we're here.
Yeah.
I go back to what we were saying earlier too. I don't, I've been here 38 years. I have no desire to see more people in the shoulder season, but the ones that come here, I'd like to see them spend more. So, and in the summer months, the 10 months or so of the year that we have the tourists anyway, if we have them spending up, that's great. We generate more ATAX funds that way. But certainly I think we have opportunity in the shoulder season. Maybe it's more, maybe it's more related to what happens out in the, inside the gates, the wild dunes, with weddings and things like that at the Sweetgrass Inn. You have those kind of opportunities too, that could generate more, but not necessarily more traffic. I mean, they'd be staying at the hotel, they'd be having events there, probably shuttling from the airport, that sort of thing.
That's right. I think an important thing, not necessarily off-season focus, but it's diversification. Right?
Mhm.
There's a completely demographic that comes in the summer compared to the spring and fall, right? So the peak tourism that is here when kids are out of school, right? You'll see a huge influx in spring break, you'll see a huge influx in the summer, and probably a decent spike around the holidays. Now, what happens in the spring and the fall here is people like to get married. Businesses are, in full swing. Their employees can travel, and that's where you see a lot of those banquets and group events happen. It's in the spring and the fall. So I think not necessarily just an off-season focus, but it's a diversification of clientele that we're bringing.
So it's definitely different off-season. It's gray hair. And our rentals provide parking by code anyway. And they all go out to dinner at least once or twice during their week. And they go to the grocery store. I mean, they do contribute to the community, and they are not really our problem. Because like I say, they park on our properties. And so I don't think that's our problem, or the people that come and spend the serious money. It's the people that come for the weekend from other places. Anyway, that has nothing to do with it.
Of course, Curtis bails out of Isle of Palms during the summer months. At the end of this month, he'll be leaving for Aspen, so Aspen will get his contributions.
And it's packed too.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I'm sure.
There's just no great spot that's not going to be packed.
Okay. Any other thoughts regarding off-season? Okay. Tourism management focus, item number 7.
So here we have tourism development while preserving and maintaining residential quality of life. We've talked about that. And a more of an interdisciplinary approach that includes tourism management and city planning and policy making. That was one of the last things that was discussed at that last meeting. We didn't expand too much on it, so I would like to hear your thoughts on this particular strategy.
Thoughts?
Thinking about land use and planning, congestion, traffic, should the DMO be working more in collaboration with the city in ensuring that the infrastructure per se is in place to support the tourism activity and potentially more tourism activity in the future?
Let's define that a little better. The interdisciplinary approach that includes tourism management, city planning.
Well, I think that in order to support tourism management, the city has to establish it has to have in place an infrastructure to support tourism activity, whether that's more city resources or essentially city resources to support that. If we're expecting more congestion in the off season or even during this season, do we have the resources in place to support that without impacting the quality of life of our residents? we have to, in my mind, not think about tourism management in a vacuum. The tourism management as it impacts essentially city resources. and city-
Yeah, Desiree, to your point, I think this starts with the vision, right? So it starts with the vision, our strategic goals, and then that'll flow down to the DMO. And we need to define that, how that DMO is managed to a certain degree in the city and work in close collaboration with whatever DMO we choose. So it's, wow, we're getting a lot of traffic. Where are you guys marketing? Well, we're doing, the two tank, market here. So that's why we're getting this influx of cars and parking versus like, okay, let's look a little further out so people will fly in and Uber to their accommodation. Right, so it's those kinds of things. So this goes back to my point where I think we really need a dedicated manager of the DMO. I don't know if that's, someone on a committee, that's on the accommodations advisory committee. I don't know if that's adding to the city staff. But I think there needs to be some sort of point person managing that relationship.
Can people on the accommodations tax committee also be on the DMO? I mean, they're the ones with all the knowledge. They've been studying it for years. So it seems like we could benefit immensely if we had a array on that DMO. But can he if he's also on the ATAX?
No, sir.
Okay.
State law prohibits dual office holding.
So he'd have to resign from one to go to the other.
That's correct.
Well, I think we all know that there's going to be, if we decide or recommend to council that we would like to form a separate DMO, carve off a piece of that 30% and have our own DMO in addition to, what we do already with CVB. There's going to be some heavy lifting involved in this. I mean, we start looking at, getting it in place, ensuring alignment, making sure we have the vision there. I mean, we've all talked around it here. So it's like, we have to just really give that some serious thought as to how that would look going forward. And what would, and if council agrees, then there's going to be, there definitely would have to be some process or mechanism in place to appoint a committee to look at that, inform that, and go from there, basically. So.
Well, if you can use accommodation tax to help pay for an employee, that would sure help. I don't know, we weren't sure whether you were allowed to take accommodation tax money and use it to pay for an employee.
Be interesting to know what Folly does. That staff person that they have on the committee that attends each month or quarterly or whenever they meet, how does that get subsidized? So we can check into that. I mean, I don't know if that's
Yeah,
just,
but you're right. It's going to be a lot more expensive, a lot more work involved. If we do it, the easy way is just, we'll keep it the same. But if we want to grow, we need to be willing to bite the bullet. But part of biting the bullet is coming up with more money for staff. And I don't think you guys can tack on one more thing. Maybe you can.
We certainly can.
I could tell you that from what I've seen around here in the last 2 years, that the staff that we have in place in city administration, they have their plates more than full. I can tell you that. So.
So then how would we get somebody to, well, like Folly? Okay, we can check with Folly.
Yeah, I think our
How
next,
they handle the expenditure for the representative.
yeah, staff attending their
Yeah.
committee.
May I
Yeah.
offer, just because I used to work
Yeah.
there.
Okay.
Oh,
Yeah.
great.
It started out, I don't know what it is now, but it started out as other duties as assigned sort of thing. The accounts, they had an accounts payable clerk who worked for the director of finance, and it became her job. So she was the representative on that committee because she was the one who was taking the check requests and writing the checks for things that they needed. So that just made sense in her job, and she had a little bit of flexibility and time to handle that additional duty as assigned. Whether or not she's compensated through her salary from, part of her salary is compensated through ATAX. That part I don't know, but that's what it started out as.
Okay,
She just was like, oh, you're doing.
yeah, okay. That's good
So
insight.
primarily writing checks.
That was her job originally when I was there, and that because her position as being that appointee didn't exist at the time. But during my tenure at Folly Beach, they were like, oh, Robin can be this because she's writing the checks anyway. So she should just go and pay attention to what's going on and come back and tell the director of finance. But like I said, I don't know if her salary is portioned out and paid through ATAX, or if it's just other duties as assigned by the city administrator. I don't.
So a call of Folly Beach would
Yep.
answer
That will be one of our next steps. All right. Any other thoughts on that before we move on?
One more thought.
Uh-huh.
Preserving and maintaining residential quality of life. I mean, I think we all know residents benefit greatly from ATAX funding, and we also incur some challenges or problems as a result of all of it. I think this ties back to number 3 with trying to get a reduction in that percentage and giving us more flexibility to have messaging that addresses some of those problems that residents talk about often. Trash on the beach, for instance, or people struggling to find a parking space. If we have greater flexibility in how we're able to spend our ATAX funding, then it allows us to tie those two pieces together and really address some of the concerns that residents have and make sure that we're reinvesting that money and trying to create a viable solution.
Good point. Good point. And
that. Win-win.
yeah, yeah. And to your point, also, Sarah, you touched on this certainly, but the residents do benefit around here because of the amount of accommodations tax revenue that we have. It helps us keep our taxes low, for sure. And we don't want to see tax increases if something happens and this goes the other way. So we want to be real careful with that too. Okay, good point. And Desiree, thanks for capturing that. I know this was all part of the conversations we've had in our few previous meetings that we've had. And this is good for us to have this discussion to take away and maybe give it some more thought if we could. And I would ask if you think of anything that needs to be added, then please let Desiree know any other thoughts on this so we can capture it. And I would say the same for anyone in, the public, the residents out there that have, this will be on record here anyway.
Mhm.
So, I would encourage any resident of this island to not only look at our meetings here, but also to look at any attachments they may have and weigh in. It'd be well accepted if you would do that. So thank you for this.
If we do decide to do our DMO, would we consult a Robert Smith as a possibility? I mean, are we going to expand it? Or are we going to be pretty much doing what Folly did in their advertising the ATAX?
I don't think we're not at that point.
Okay.
Yeah, we're not at that point. That would have to be, that idea would have to be pitched to city council, would have to be agreed upon, and then there would have to be a process. Now, Desiree, you might have to walk me through this as to how you go about, choosing another DMO. I don't know if that's through like an RFP. I have no idea.
That could be the process. If more than one DMO is in place,
Uh-huh.
then a competitive procurement process could be followed.
Mhm. Okay. All right, item number 5, Q&A. Is there any other questions or answers needed, from our panel in regards to over and above what we've already discussed here today?
I know that at the last meeting, it was requested that you all receive a presentation from the newly formed IOP Chamber of Commerce. I communicated with you all via email that they've requested more time So once we set up our future meeting, we can check with them and see if they would be prepared to provide a presentation.
But can they be a DMO for what we're working on? Or is that a conflict of interest? I mean, I was kind of hoping that they could, since they're already up and running. But I think Glenda said, and you're an expert on this, you can't. They're two different groups. Is that the case?
Well, I'm certainly no expert, so we would need to check on with council to see whether or not they fit the DMO definition from state law and whether or not they would be an eligible organization to receive funding.
Can I wait? Yeah, go ahead.
Because if they can't be a DMO for this, then probably no reason to have them. If it looks like they could be a DMO for the effort for the tourist money, then we would have them. But if we can't make them a DMO, should we even have them?
Well, state law, it says that a regional tourism organization, a chamber of commerce would be eligible. Therefore, if they're in, that's correct.
Yeah. So I mean, it's clear that a chamber could have that status. And think about our newly formed chamber. That's pretty much what they've indicated too. Again, newly formed. I mean, they really haven't gotten off the ground yet. And I mean, other than forming and having some meetings, so they're in the process of really putting the organization together. But they have indicated, through media and otherwise, that they feel like they would have, DMO status by the way that they formed. Now, that's a big leap from, when you've got a newly formed chamber, it would be tough for me to, as a council member, just thinking about it, to say, I'm going to give a newly formed chamber X number of dollars, run with it for tourism until they have a proven track record.
But if you form your own DMO, you still don't know until they have a proven track record. In either case, there is an unknown. And if in fact we can use them, but I've heard different opinions on that, whether it's really legal to have the tourist board, tourism for your city, also do the DMO.
We can only speak to what state law says, and state law says that a
Says you
chamber
can,
of commerce would be
Okay.
eligible.
Right.
Okay.
That's a
It's pretty-
legal question, but then you may all have different opinions, whether it's the right thing to do or not the right thing to do, or the advisable thing to do. That's different on whether or not it would be legal.
And we're going to be hearing from the Chamber of Commerce too. I mean, they are definitely going to make a presentation.
Okay.
I had a conversation with Trina several days ago, and she had asked that, that we schedule them a little bit later because I think they had a marketing meeting this past week, and they were just getting some information put together there. So she just felt that they didn't have enough to really come to us with in terms of a presentation. But on our next steps and when we get our next meeting date decided here, we certainly intend to have them come and make a presentation to us. Just as CVB is done, just as Folly's done, Little Dog Agency. Okay. Item number 6, discussion of what additional data, research, information needed by task force. Any thoughts on that? Anybody? Right?
I just, we received the updated report, but it's the same report. It's not updated because there's no new information concerning where the source of revenues are coming from. I was just going to ask, maybe Sam can influence some response from Wild Dunes to give us those numbers so that but it would be both to their, I don't think it's a bad thing. It could only be a good thing as far as us understanding where the money's coming.
Right, and I'll have to see if we're willing to release that private information, but I assume it would be within the similar percentage, plus or minus, 5 to 10% or so.
Well, we know that we provide more than they do in accommodation tax revenue, just from this report. You have the report. Yeah.
Yeah, there's more going on than just that. You'll notice the online travel company numbers are incredibly increased, and that's because of a corporate decision made by the online travel companies. They now pay state tax, whereas back in 2019, they didn't. The property manager and or owner manager paid the state tax. That's why that number has really moved like it has, because the owner or property manager doesn't receive the tax money from the online travel agency anymore. The online travel agency is remitting their taxes to the municipalities. That's a big part of that. But what we do see is that if you put together the Wild Dunes and the IOP real estate agencies, it's pretty flat. 2019 to 2021, whereas the online travel companies have increased. But one question I had, and I don't know if we can get this answer, is are the online travel booking tax revenue numbers, are they categorized in the agencies? For instance, if Highland Realty has 50 properties, let's say, all 50 properties are on VRBO. If somebody rents a property through VRBO that's managed by Island Realty, is that tax money coming from the Isle of Palms real estate agency category, or is it coming from the online travel company category? Which is that?
I think they would be under the same rules that we are, that VRBO or Airbnb collects the taxes. It's just, they all run an ad for VRBO and Isle of Palms. And so the money is collected the same way, whether it's Island Realty.
No, I understand, but it's categorized in this report. You've got a one line item, IOP real estate agencies. Back in 2019, it was over $1 million. Whereas now we don't know what it is. But you see the online travel companies go from 146,000 to 804,000. So is that coming from the IOP real estate agencies because it's being remitted through the VRBOs of the world?
No, that would be shown as under online travel. It's whoever books the stay, even if that property is managed by a real estate management company. If the booking happens on Airbnb, Airbnb
Yeah.
pays the tax.
That would be my, I would think the same thing. So therefore, if the Wild Dunes and the IOP real estate agencies are flat, like I say, from 19 to 20, that means Wild Dunes has increased a lot.
Mhm.
And I think we should know that, because that would help us.
Also noted in this, you can see the short-term rental licenses use. That was a question that was asked. We have updated numbers for 2021. And you can see that the total number of licenses went down from 2020 to 2021, but the number inside Wild Dunes went up. So we had about 100 less licenses outside Wild Dunes. And, the growth, I guess we're seeing it inside the gates.
So one thing I would say is if we're seeing this migration to online travel bookings, should there be discussion to say, well, our promotional money should some of our promotional money should be geared towards online travel bookings, because that's where all the growth is right now. Just like The analogy would be if you had a brick and mortar store, and then all of a sudden internet shopping happens.
Right.
If you don't have a website, you're gonna go away. So it's the same idea where, you know, you've got the traditional old brick and mortar type method of booking a vacation. Now that's all migrated to primarily, or the majority being online.
Desiree, quick question. How is the sweetgrassing categorized?
I would say in the wild dunes.
The sweetgrass in.
Oh,
Yeah,
separately?
how is that categorized? Is it even included in this analysis? Or does each have a short-term rental license itself? Or are we just talking individual?
If they have, this is only those that have a short-term rental license. In terms of the short-term rental licenses used.
So this doesn't include any hotels at all.
The financial piece, yes, it does. It's included in the Wild Dunes number.
Oh, okay, I got you.
Okay, I'm just wondering, are there,
Sweetgrass is it's not the new hotel.
that
That's,
is the hotel.
Yeah,
so the new hotel is just a hotel, but the one that had, so it's not in the short-term rental numbers.
Okay.
What's the building that was the first phase that has,
Right,
and
village.
the villages has,
Town residents, sweetgrass, just-
yeah. So those, each of those has its own rental license. And some of those actually have two if they have a lock-off
Right,
unit.
right.
So those are all individual, but the hotels are just one. Not, and they're not in the short-term rental numbers there at all.
any other thoughts? Item 6. Well, we know we're going to hear from the chamber. We're going to set that up for our next meeting. Let's look at the meeting date. Let's look at number 8 before we finish up with item number 7 here. So in regards to the next meeting date, I know that the chamber did indicate that by May the 26th, which is what, 2 weeks from now, that they would be prepared to make a presentation. Is that date good for everybody?
I will not be able to.
Okay. Okay.
Can you make another date around there? Or are you locked into those dates?
No, we
No.
can be flexible.
Whatever works for
Yeah.
the group.
Right.
I can make that Friday work or that.
That Friday is the Friday of Memorial Day, just so.
Oh,
Oh, yeah, that's,
so Tuesday, because we've lost Randy evidently.
no, Randy will be back.
Oh, he will.
Yeah, he had a total knee replacement,
Oh,
but he said the next meeting he could make it.
okay.
And he's also been keeping up with what
Oh.
we're doing here too. He's, you know, asked for minutes and he's watching it online, that sort of thing. So
Oh.
he's keeping up
Great.
from what he conveyed to us.
So you're saying you're available Tuesday? 24th. Is everybody else? Oh, sorry.
No. Let's see, I've got to look at my personal calendar too. That happens to be my birthday and I don't have a problem, but I think I got a conflict here.
That night, probably.
Well, I think during the day I do also. I think there's another, yeah, we have city council that night, but we've got,
Yeah.
yeah. Let's talk about, I tell you what, while I look at my calendar, I'm trying to pull this up. Desiree, can we see what we can capture in regards to next steps or assignments based on what we've discussed here so
Well,
far?
all I have is the presentation from the chamber, unless there's anything else that the committee would like to see.
Okay.
Oh, and that we want to get some clarity on whether or not we could use tourism funds from the 30% to cover the expense of a staff person.
Part-time staff.
I could do the 24th. We will do 9 a.m. May the 24th, 9 a.m. All right, and we got next steps and assignments, and we will be inviting the chamber.
You know, does she have the requirement for a DMO as far as the number of members that would in fact qualify, you know, coming from from all the different categories that they have to come from?
So that would be separate. If they are a DMO, the city would still have to appoint an advisory board, similar makeup as our
Oh.
current ATAX, to
That's what I
oversee them.
meant. So she really can't be. You're saying the city would have to appoint another board?
Same relationship as we have an ATAX committee and then the CVB is the one doing the work. This would be the same arrangement. A new committee and then a new DMO doing the work. So similar arrangement.
That's our understanding, but certainly we can get more clarity on that.
So can she or can't she? She can in fact be the tourist accommodation tax DMO.
She being who?
Uh,
You're talking about Chamber of Commerce.
chamber.
Oh, the
Sorry.
chamber.
But just keep in mind, Curtis, they really are just.
No, I
born.
know.
Yeah, I mean,
But they're a little bit further ahead than the council would, starting from scratch, having to find members that could be on DMO that would qualify.
well, part of what I'd like to hear from, I think we all should hear, is when they make the presentation, we'll have an opportunity then to hear just where they are, you know, in the process. I mean, how many members do they have? You know, what does their structure look like? What is their vision? You know, I think we can get a lot of good information once they
Okay,
make a
yeah, no.
presentation. And then decide for ourselves, you know, as to how that would qualify if we made that recommendation. All right, anything else?
524.
Yep, 5:24, 9 a.m. I hear a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
All in favor, say aye. Aye.